Prime Minister's Questions today has unfolded as a vivid blend of political manoeuvring, rhetorical jabs, with Kemi Badenoch really coming across very strongly, making her debut as leader of the opposition. But Keir Starmer isn't taking any prisoners. She sought to position herself as an unflinching critic of Labour's policies and practices, deploying sharp commentary aimed squarely at Sir Keir Starmer's leadership and Labour's historic stance on Donald Trump. Her pointed query about whether Starmer would extend an invitation to Trump to speak in Westminster Hall was a strategic strike, highlighting perceived inconsistencies in Labour's approach to statesmanship, particularly with the Republicans, and Starmer's retort that Badenoch was conducting a masterclass on student politics underscored his view that her provocation was more theatrical than substantial, and he pointed out that he'd, in his last trip to the United States, he had dinner with Donald Trump. Badenoch's performance demonstrated poise as she attempted to carve out a space for herself by addressing both symbolic and policy-driven issues, and from scrutinising Labour's handling of defence spending to condemning the so-called cruel family farms tax, she aimed to resonate with Tory supporters concerned about economic and rural matters. Her critique of Labour's budget as Bidenomics was entertaining. It was a calculated move to align Starmer's economic policy with the policies of the outgoing US administration, setting up potential electoral battle lines for the future. Starmer, for his part, balanced between rebuffing Badenoch's barbs and reaffirming Labour's commitments. His refusal to apologise for David Lammy's past criticisms of Trump reflected a nuanced stance, one that acknowledges contentious history while maintaining a diplomatic posture, and Starmer's reference to public sacrifices during COVID contrasted them with Badenoch's dismissive remarks on Partygate, and that was after Badenoch had stopped speaking. That was another question from a backbencher. So Badenoch continued to be the focus of quite a number of issues in today's PMQs. It served as a pointed reminder of the Conservatives' recent missteps, and as somebody pointed out, she's the leader of the opposition for this week. The session also saw important questions on economic policy, including inheritance tax implications for farmers and national insurance rises. Starmer's responses were measured, focusing on balancing fiscal responsibility with targeted support. Notably, he didn't pledge a specific date for meeting the 2.5% GDP defence spending target, drawing criticism from Badenoch and fueling her narrative of Labour's indecision. There was an entertaining question about his musical prowess with Fatboy Slim, Norm Cook, and with Andrew Sullivan. Ben Obese Ject's question on Dawn Butler's controversial repost further escalated the tension, pressing Starmer on intra-party discipline, and Starmer's succinct disapproval without addressing suspension left a slight ambiguity, maintaining party unity at the cost of some perceived hesitance. Overall, Badenoch's debut was assertive, if sometimes leaning into the performative. Starmer experienced in such encounters appeared prepared but cautious, focused on presenting himself as a stabilising leader amid a barrage of jibes, and this PMQ set the tone for future confrontations, defining Badenoch's approach as combative and Starmer's as pragmatic, albeit punctuated with political barbs of his own. And certainly Badenoch's history means she's not going to get off lightly.
Dame Caroline Dinenage.
Question number one, Mr. Speaker.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, can I begin by congratulating President-elect Trump on his historic election victory. As the closest of allies, the UK and US will continue to work together to protect our shared values of freedom and democracy. And having had dinner with President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago, I look forward to working with him in the years to come. May I also welcome the Leader of the Opposition to her place, my fourth Tory leader in 4.5 years. but I do look forward to working with her in the interests of the British public. Mr. Speaker, this weekend is Remembrance Sunday, and people across the country will come together to pay solemn tribute to those who made the ultimate sacrifice, defending the values and freedoms that we enjoy today. And I'm sure the entire House will join me in paying tribute to them. Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others. In addition to my duties in this House, I shall have further such meetings later today.
Dame Caroline.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. My constituent Susan is going to miss out on her winter fuel allowance this winter because she's just £10 above the pension credit threshold. So as well as losing out on this vital money to keep her house warm, she also doesn't get the £150 warm home discount. She doesn't get the £169 free TV licence or free NHS prescriptions. For the sake of a tenner, Prime Minister, is this fair?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we passed a budget which was to fix the foundations of this country and to rebuild our country. And one of the issues we had to confront was the £22 billion black hole that was left by the last government. We've taken the tough decisions. That will stabilise our economy. That means we can commit to the triple lock, and that means that pensioners will be better off seeing the increase in their pension they would have been under the party opposite.
Jacob Collier.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Every week I meet hard-working families in Burton and New Toxteth who are juggling raising their children and their family finances. When they hear the party opposite and its new leader say that maternity pay has gone too far, they are terrified about what this means for them. To ease the worry felt by thousands of hard-working families, can the Prime Minister please commit that he has no plans to change maternity pay or to roll back the hard-won rights of working families?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for his question. He's a champion for families in his constituency. My answer is simple, yes. And I don't agree with the Leader of the Opposition when she says that maternity pay is excessive and that it's gone too far.
I come to the Leader of the Opposition.
Mr. Speaker, can I thank the Prime Minister for his almost warm welcome? And can I also echo the comments that he has made? It is an immense privilege and the honour of my life to lead the Conservative Party. And I look forward to joining him at the Cenotaph this Remembrance Sunday. As leader of His Majesty's opposition, I will be taking a different approach to the last opposition by being a constructive opposition. And so I would like to start by congratulating President-elect Trump on his impressive victory this morning. The Prime Minister and the Foreign Secretary met him in September. Did the Foreign Secretary take that opportunity to apologise for making derogatory and scatological references, including, and I quote, Trump is not only a woman-hating, neo-Nazi sympathising sociopath, he is also a profound threat to the international order. And if he did not apologise, will the Prime Minister do so now on his behalf?
Mr. Speaker, there will be many issues on which the Leader of the Opposition and I disagree, but there will be issues that do unite this House on national security and Ukraine, and I do look forward to working closely with her on that, and I will provide her with the information that she needs to discharge her duties. That's the right thing for the country, and it's far more important than party politics. And the Foreign Secretary and I did meet President-elect Trump just a few weeks ago for dinner for about a couple of hours, and we discussed a number of issues of global significance. It was a very constructive exercise.
Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister did not distance himself from the remarks made by the Foreign Secretary, and I'm very sure that President Trump will soon be calling to thank him for sending all of those North London Labour activists to campaign for his opponent. Given that most of his cabinet signed a motion to ban President Trump from addressing Parliament, will the Prime Minister show that he and his government can be more than student politicians by asking the Speaker to extend Can they show that they can be more than student politics?
Order. Mr. Perkins, I don't need to anymore. Your voice curries, it's like mine, too loud.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will the Prime Minister show that he and his government can be more than student politicians by asking you, Mr. Speaker, to extend an invitation to President Trump to address Parliament on his next visit?
Prime Minister.
The Leader of the Opposition is giving a masterclass on student politics. But seriously, Mr. Speaker, we live in probably a more volatile world than we've lived in for many decades. It is absolutely crucial that we have a strong relationship, that strong special relationship forged in difficult circumstances between the US and the UK. We will continue to work, as we have done in the 4 months in government, on issues of security, our economy and global conflict.
Mr. Speaker, he does not answer the questions, just read the lines the officials have prepared for him. It doesn't sound like he wants to invite President-elect Trump to Parliament. He needs to look after the special relationship. The US is our single biggest trade partner. Given the risk of increased tariffs on UK exports, which threaten our manufacturing sector, will the Prime Minister commit now to continue the negotiations on our free trade agreement with the US, which the Biden administration cancelled when they came into office?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, of course we will discuss issues of our economy with the President-elect, as we already have done. Economy, security and global conflict are issues of real significance that ought to unite this House. But when it comes to the economy, what we've done with our budget is to fix the foundations after 14 years of return to economic stability. That's a £22 million black hole. We've protected the pay slips of working people. We've done the single biggest investment in our country for a generation in the NHS, in schools and homes. We've given a pay rise to the 3 million lowest paid. Now, if she's opposed to that investment or the pay rise for working people, she's a straight talker as I understand it, perhaps she should say so.
Mr. Speaker, discuss, chat. He has no plans whatsoever. No plans whatsoever for building on the special relationship. He needs to realise that we in this country rely on our single biggest trade partner. President Trump is also right to argue that Europe needs to increase its defence spending. The last Conservative government committed to raising defence spending to 2.5% by 2030. Will the Prime Minister finally match this commitment?
Mr. Speaker, there is no more important duty than keeping the people of this country safe. And it was the Labour government that signed the NATO treaty in the first place, and we are strong supporters. We have a strategic defence review. We are committed to 2.5%. Well, I would remind the last time 2.5 was met was under the last Labour government. 14 years, and they never did it once. Last year, the NAO identified a £17 billion black hole in the MOD finances. The former Defence Secretary said the previous government hollowed out the armed forces, and the plan they put forward at the election was pure fantasy.
Mr. Speaker, he will not make that commitment. That is very clear. All that he is doing...
I'm going to hear the questions. If the people who don't want to hear it, they can leave now. Come on.
Mr. Speaker, he will not make that commitment, and yet the world is getting more dangerous. His Chancellor's budget did not even mention defence. The Chancellor's budget last week was a copy and paste of Bidenomics. It turns out that a high-spending, high-borrowing, high-inflation approach is less popular than she may have thought. May I suggest he now urge her to change course, or is he determined to be a one-term leader?
Prime Minister.
The one thing I learned as Leader of the Opposition is it's a good idea to listen to what the government is actually saying. I think she just said that defence wasn't mentioned in the budget. It was 7 days ago that it was absolutely clear and central to the budget, as was economic growth. We are fixing the foundations. We're giving a pay rise to millions of people. We're picking up the mess that they left, 22 billion, and a tax rise and a pay rise for working people. And I haven't heard yet her welcome that pay rise for the 3 million lowest paid workers. Does she now welcome it? Does she stick to her previous policy that it's excessive?
Mr. Speaker, I was the one who raised the minimum wage last year as business secretary. I have a strong record on this, but we need to make sure that we balance the books. His scripted lines are showing that he has not even listened to the budget himself. So I will try a different question. Perhaps he can give something that is unscripted to the people watching. Farmers across the United Kingdom... Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker. Mr.
Order! I don't need any help. Can I just say, if somebody wants to leave, I'll be helping them do that. I'm going to hear the question, and I certainly want to hear the answer as well. So please, let's have some courtesy.
Mr. Speaker, we have heard him repeat the lines on the television, fixing the foundations and so on. But what does he say, over and over again, but what does he say to farmers who are facing uncertainty about their futures as a result of the increased taxes announced by the Chancellor? I am very clear that we would reverse Labour's cruel family farms tax. What can he say now to reassure the farming community who provide security for the whole nation?
Prime Minister.
I'm happy to help the Leader of the Opposition. If she's going to complain about scripted answers, it's probably best not to read that from a script. What I will say about farmers is this. I'm glad she's raised farmers, because the budget last week put £5 billion over the next 2 years into farming. That's the single biggest increase, unlike the 300 million, which was an underspend under the last government. And when it comes to inheritance, the vast majority of farmers will be unaffected, as she well knows, as they well know. But that budget was about fixing the foundations, fixing the whole 22 billion that they left, and investing in the future of our country, investing in our NHS, investing in our schools, our hospitals and our homes. And I'm proud that that's the investment work. And if they oppose it, they should go out there and tell their constituents they're against that investment in the future of our country. That's the difference. A Labour government taking us forward. They're stuck in the past.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'm going to hear Matthew Patrick.
Mr. Speaker, Emily left her ex, but the abuse did not stop. He stayed in their home, cancelled the mortgage contributions and destroyed her credit score. Now she cannot even take out a mobile phone contract. Surviving economic abuse and UK finance have made progress tackling this issue, but more has to be done. Will the Prime Minister and his government work with me to introduce new provisions so that we can restore the credit files for survivors of economic abuse like Emily?
Well, I thank my honourable friend for raising this really important issue, because economic abuse has a devastating impact on victims, leaving them vulnerable and isolated. And we are committed to ending this national emergency and keeping women safe from domestic abuse, harassment and stalking. And, Mr. Speaker, that includes 200,000 this year to the charity Surviving Economic Abuse, and HMRC have launched an online tool to help charities and businesses identify and respond to economic abuse. And I'll make sure he has a meeting with the relevant minister.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Sir Ed Davey.
Can I join the Prime Minister in his comments about Remembrance Sunday? We must always remember the brave British men and women who gave their lives for our country. And can I join him in welcoming the Conservative leader to her place? And can I congratulate her on becoming the first black leader of a UK-wide party, a major and historic achievement? Mr. Speaker, President-elect Trump praised Vladimir Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And I quote, he called it genius. He also said he would encourage Russia to do whatever the hell they want to NATO allies. So what action is the Prime Minister taking to encourage a Trump presidency to change its mind, because otherwise it's a huge threat to global security and to national security in the UK. Does he agree with me that the US will not oppose President Putin and support our brave Ukrainian allies? The UK must lead in Europe so that together we do.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very proud that in this House we are united on the question of Ukraine and clear about Russian aggression, and we will continue to do so. I've long taken the view that the only winner, if we are divided in this House, is Putin, and I'm not prepared to let that happen. Our relationship with the US is a strong relationship forged in very difficult circumstances historically. It remains as strong today as it was when it was first forged, and I look forward to working with President-elect Trump to ensure that relationship stays a special relationship.
Shred David.
I'm grateful for the Prime Minister's comments on Ukraine, but Donald Trump has also said that trade wars are good. He calls himself tariff man. People are really worried that Trump trade wars and tariff will damage our economy, damage businesses, and hit the cost of living here in the UK. So, given this, does the Prime Minister recognise that it's more urgent than ever that we support our British economy by getting rid of the damaging trade barriers with Europe put in place by the Conservatives?
Prime Minister.
Well, Mr. Speaker, as he will know, we've put the economy centrepiece to our budget, and we will do everything that we need to do to ensure our economy grows, and that's measured in living standards going up for working people across the country. Thank you.
Alex Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There are so many families across Aldershot and Farnborough who have struggled for years to get their children the need they help with special educational needs. It is therefore shameful to read misguided claims that autistic people may well get better treatment and receive economic privileges and protections made by the Leader of the Opposition. Will the Prime Minister stand with families of autistic children and distance this government from those awful words?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'll leave the Leader of the Opposition to respond to those words. As the recent NAO report exposed, under the previous government, children with SEND were being failed by the system, and this has come up, I think, now 5 times in the last 2 or 3 weeks at PMQs. It's clearly a serious issue. Our focus will be ensuring every child receives the right support to succeed in their education.
Source Eastwood.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Prime Minister, Northern Ireland is considered one of the most dangerous places in Europe to be a woman. In the last 4 years, 24 women have been killed. But one of the most dangerous places for women and girls is online. I also want to pay tribute to the work of Belfast and Lisburn Women's Aid, who are tireless in their advocacy for women. So what is this government doing to keep women and girls safe online, not just in Lagan Valley, but right across the United Kingdom?
Prime Minister.
Well, the right honourable member is right to draw attention to this issue. Misogyny and abuse, both online and offline, causes horrendous harm to women and girls across the UK. And can I just commend her honesty and bravery in speaking out about her own experiences and her dedication to creating safe spaces for women in her constituency. We must create a safer world online for women and girls through the Online Safety Act, mitigating the risk of illegal content and activity which is abusive or incites hatred.
Bill Cole.
Everyone in Southwark will benefit from the positive measures in the budget last week, especially the thousands on the minimum wage, getting a real terms increase to help themselves, help their families and help the economy. But the new leader of the Tory party, this week's leader, is on record as saying she wants to scrap it, having seemingly learnt nothing from July. Will the Prime Minister pledge to protect the minimum wage and increase it in this Parliament as finances allow?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, the last Labour government transformed the labour market with the national minimum wage, something which was opposed by the party opposite at the time. And sadly, they don't seem to have changed. I was surprised by the comments of the Leader of the Opposition. I was surprised to see the new Shadow Business Secretary say the minimum wage, and this is a quote, something legislators pass to make themselves feel good. I disagree, and I'm very proud of the fact that this Labour government has raised wages for 3 million of low-paid workers, and I expect the party opposite to welcome that.
George Freeman!
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years shaping the UK's long-term strategies for life science, agri-tech, fusion and space, I welcome the government's industrial strategy. But too many of our great companies are being bought out by our competitors. To build the industries of tomorrow here, we need to unlock some of the hundreds of billions in UK pension funds in the city, only 3% of which are now investing in UK equities. With the new Lord Mayor making this a priority and the Mansion House speech imminent, will the new government commit to see through the last government's reforms to unlock British capital for British R&D growth?
Well, I thank him for welcoming the industrial strategy, and I do know this is an issue close to his heart that he has spoken about and acted on for many years. The budget sees record numbers of R&D investment, with over 20 billion next year, including over 2 billion to support our world-leading life sciences sector. And through the British Growth Partnership, we'll crowd in pension funds investment to support innovative business. And we've launched our landmark pensions review to unlock the billions of investment into the UK and boost growth and living standards across the country. Thank you.
Catherine Fuchs.
Mr. Speaker, as the Chancellor said last week, we were left a toxic legacy by the previous government, including rivers filled with polluted waste. Will the Prime Minister put the River Wye into special measures by designating it a water protection zone? And will he meet with me and the excellent cross-border Wye Catchment Partnership to deliver their plan to clean up the Wye?
Prime Minister.
The River Wye is one of our most important, iconic rivers, and we are working closely with the Welsh Government on this pressing issue. A destruction of our waterways should never have been allowed, and that's why we launched a Water Commission to attract investment and speed up infrastructure delivery. And we introduced legislation to enable tougher penalties and severe fines to crack down on polluters. I will make sure that she gets a meeting with the relevant minister.
Baron of the House to Edmund
As a good lawyer, I know the Prime Minister will want to listen to the evidence. So if the evidence mounts from experts in organisations such as the NFU that smaller family farms of average size, 250 acres, are going to be severely impacted by this tax, in a spirit of compromise, will he listen to the evidence, keep an open mind, and perhaps be prepared to raise the thresholds to preserve our family farms?
Mr. Speaker, we are listening to farmers, and the Environment Secretary and the Treasury Ministers met with the NFU on Monday of this week. We have taken a fair and balanced approach. The vast majority of farms will not be affected by this. But what I will also say is, having grown up in a rural community, I know that rural communities also need an NHS that's back on its feet. They also need schools that their children can go to and homes that their families can afford to live in. But we will continue to talk to the NFU and others.
Mary Glenda.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This week, the Leader of the Opposition told us that any outrage at suitcases full of wine and karaoke machines in Downing Street, whilst people across the country were told to stay at home, was all overblown. For the people and businesses in my constituency who followed the rules, many of us at great personal cost, this is an insult. Will the Prime Minister join me in ensuring that, as a country, we learn the lessons from COVID, and as a party, the Conservatives learn the lessons of their behaviour too?
Mr. Speaker, across the country, people made enormous sacrifices during COVID. They missed weddings, births, deaths, really important moments in their lives and their families' lives. In doing so, they saved the lives of people they will probably never meet. That was a collective effort, and unfortunately the party opposite who set the rules did not follow them themselves. It was a betrayal of those that did, And I think the Leader of the Opposition was wrong to describe the public anger and upset as overblown. I'm sure she'll want to clarify that at the first opportunity.
Cyfarwydd, Glan Horse Nursing Home is in my constituency in Ysmôn. Tell me that the budget changes mean a 10% increase in their cost. That's a staggering £127,500 extra in-year cost. Will the Prime Minister reconsider the rise in the employer's national insurance?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, what we did in the budget last week was to ensure that no one would face tax rises in their payslip. We had to deal with the £22 billion black hole, but when we did so, we protected the smallest businesses and charities. We doubled the employment allowance to £10,500. That means that 40% of employers won't pay employers' NICs. Companies with 4 employees or less on a minimum wage will pay no employer NICs at all, and half of businesses that pay NICs will see no change or pay less after the budget. Thank you.
Bill Brickle.
Yeah, my constituents in Bolton West were pleased to hear last week's budget prioritise investment in public infrastructure, including important projects such as the electrification of the Wigan to Bolton railway line, which will deliver more reliable and greener journeys. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that investment in the key infrastructure of towns such as Horwich, West Horton, Blackrod and Bolton is the only way to deliver economic growth and prosperity for all?
Yeah. Prime Minister.
Well, my honourable friend is a champion for the North West, and the budget secured investment for vital transport projects to transform connectivity across the north of England and drive economic growth. And that includes completing the Wigan to Bolton electrification, a really important momentum on the Northern Powerhouse Rail. Over £5 billion to support everyday journeys for working people. By restoring economic stability, increasing investment, we're taking our country forward.
Victoria Collins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Swan Youth Project in Berkhamsted is an incredible drop-in centre that intervenes to bring hope and a better future to teenagers like Lex and Megan who've been facing anxiety, depression and long mental health waiting lists, as well as families coping with SEND. They've already written to the Treasury saying that they're worried about getting the funds that they need as our communities face a tough winter and grants are depleting. Parul, the manager, also assures me that she makes a mean curry and would welcome the Prime Minister. So will the Prime Minister join me to discuss their concerns and ensure that organisations in the third sector like theirs get the support that they need as they work tirelessly for our communities?
Prime Minister.
She'll be pleased now. I've been to Berkhamsted a number of times. We've got very good friends who live there. And I want to pay tribute to the work of the Swan Youth Project because too many young people, she's cited some, are struggling with mental health and not receiving the support that they need. And that's why we will recruit an additional 8,500 mental health workers and are introducing reforms to the Mental Health Act, long overdue, and that's happening today. Of course, we will also put more money into SEND, but we also need to look at reforming SEND, something that I think and hope will be supported across this House, and I'll make sure she gets a meeting with the relevant ministers about that.
My right honourable friend, the Prime Minister, will know that after 14 years of Tory ideological hostility and cuts, our universities are in financial meltdown. In my own constituency of Norwich South, the University of East Anglia is having to make redundancies, as are many others. Our honourable friend, the Secretary of State for Education, has started to address the problem, but we need a longer-term solution that doesn't simply saddle more debt on our young people. So can my right honourable friend say how we can move to fix the foundations of higher education as we go forward?
Prime Minister.
I thank him for that question. He's right to raise higher education because we inherited a sector facing severe financial challenges. Universities have suffered real terms decline in their income, and the gap between disadvantaged students and their peers is the highest on record. We've had to take tough decisions to put that on a secure footing, but we are also taking the step of easing the living pressures by increasing the maintenance loans, which is worth £414 extra per year. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Alex Brooke.
Hamilton, former sub-postmistress and constituent of North East Hampshire, has long been campaigning, along with Alan Bates, for compensation following the Horizon Post Office scandal. Can the Prime Minister give an exact time frame in which those who have been waiting over a decade might finally be compensated?
I'm grateful to her for raising this important issue, because a commitment was made to properly compensate the victims of this scandal. Unfortunately, regrettably, having made that commitment, the party opposite, when in government, didn't allocate any money to that compensation. Her constituents will be pleased to know that we have changed the approach there. We've set out the compensation within the budget, a transparent budget, an accountable budget, and we'll make the payments just as soon as we can.
Torkel Crichton.
Speaker, may I quickly echo the Prime Minister's sentiments to that other son of Lewis, though I wish I had woken up today in the Isle of Harris. My constituents there face long delays, cancellations and loss of service because of the SNP's incompetent handling of ferry procurement. In last week's budget, the Scottish Government received a record settlement. Can I urge the Prime Minister to tell the Scottish ministers to use that to improve public service in Scotland, to invest in the NHS in Hill and Year, to build schools in places like Barra, and to finally fix the ferry fiasco?
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, last week in the budget we delivered the largest settlement for the Scottish Government in real terms since devolution. That includes £3.4 billion through the Barnett formula, a fuel duty freeze, an increase to the national living wage, benefiting his constituencies and all those across Scotland. And the result of the budget is now clear. The SNP in power in Scotland have the powers, they now have the money, they've got no more excuses.
Going to be ejected.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Does the Prime Minister really think it is acceptable for a backbench MP to suggest that the Leader of the Opposition represents white supremacy in blackface and is the most prominent member of white supremacy's black collaborator class, with all the race traitor innuendo that carries? And if he doesn't, why hasn't he removed the whip?
Prime Minister.
No, I don't.
John Slinger.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a semi-retired violinist and rock musician asking a semi-retired multi-instrumentalist, I feel confident that the Prime Minister shares my belief in the importance of music education. Does my right honourable friend agree with me that as we unleash the potential of our country, we must invest in the educational infrastructure of creative arts subjects so that they're accessible to all? And will he visit my constituency to see the great work of the schools there, despite the inheritance we received?
Prime Minister.
I'm not sure about the description semi-retired, although that may be the wish of the party opposite. But on music, what I do know from personal experience is music, the creatives and art are really important for children and young people in terms of the pleasure it gives them, the knowledge, but the working in groups and the leadership. And that's why we are determined to ensure that they are counted subjects again within the curriculum, which will encourage many more schools to provide it within the curriculum and enrich the futures of children and young people across the country.
James Cleverly.
Before the election, he claimed that he would not put up national insurance contributions. He put it up. Before the election, he claimed he would scrap tuition fees. He put it up. Before the election, he said he would not tax family farms. He's taxing family farms. Will he address his party's growing reputation for dishonesty by making good on his commitment to close the Wethersfield Asylum Accommodation Centre in my constituency?
Mr. Speaker, we're keeping the promises we made in our manifesto. His problem is he can't add up. If he could add up, he might be down here rather than up there, and we'll take up the issue in his constituency.
Douglas McAllister.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Monday of this week marked the 7-year anniversary of my constituent Jagtar Singh Johal's arbitrary detention in India. Can the Prime Minister assure me that he and his government will do all they can to secure his immediate release and bring him home?
Yes, we're absolutely committed to pushing the Government of India on this really important case. And the Foreign Secretary has raised it and will continue to do so, and we'll make sure that we speak to him as we do.
Right, that completes Prime Minister's questions.
Just before going, it's worth clarifying the story of Jagtar Singh Johal. His British Sikh from Dumbarton in Scotland has been detained in India since November 2017. He was arrested in the Punjab after attending a wedding, or while attending a wedding, and accused of funding the Khalistan Liberation Force and involvement in political violence, including murders of high-profile figures. Johal faces the death penalty and has been charged in 9 cases, 8 of which remain unresolved in federal court. His detention has raised significant human rights concerns, with Johal and his supporters alleging torture, including electric shocks, forced confessions, and video recordings under duress. International advocacy has surged for Johal's release. A UN working group concluded in 2022 that his detention was arbitrary, citing his status as a human rights activist as the reason for discriminatory treatment. Despite denials by Indian authorities, Johal's claims of mistreatment remain supported by human rights organisations, including Reprieve. Over 140 UK MPs have urged successive British governments to secure Johal's release, highlighting a perceived failure to uphold the duty of protecting British citizens abroad. And recent efforts include a letter to Prime Minister Rishi Sunak, signed by 16 MPs, urging him to prioritise Johal's release. And this campaign, spearheaded by Johal's brother Gurpreet Singh Johal, aims to amplify pressure on the last UK government to act decisively. And this question today is going to reinforce that. With Johal held in solitary confinement in Delhi's Tihar jail, and the prospect of years more in pre-trial detention, advocates stress the urgent need for intervention, political intervention, to end what they term an egregious violation of human rights. It's time he was